And now,
Okay. So, if you would like a copy of these slides, then you can go ahead and scan this QR code. I'll wait a moment or two to give you a chance to get them. I'll also
she'll
say,
drop it in chat too.
oh, can we do that?
Yeah. So what we're going to give it with
Oh, just the link to the whole
just
shebang.
the link.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So Control Alt Shift H. There we go. Copy the link. Done. And the chat is
Control.
okay. So we're going to put it in chat so you can get it directly too.
Perfect. Thank you, John.
Oh, come on. Where is this?
Oh, do you have to go back?
Do I have to?
Maybe.
Shouldn't. There we go.
There
Yes.
we go. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Everyone have the link in one way or another? Hearing no objection, we'll move on.
All right. So, it's worth mentioning also that if you have questions or comments as we're going, because John and I are working on just the one monitor, we can't see you. So feel free to just like verbally interrupt or raise your hand, and then that way we'll see that you have something to say and we'll stop. So
yeah, and just unmute. You can
Yeah.
do that. It's quick and easy.
Yep. So what we wanted to do was kind of spend some time kind of talking about like the pros and cons to thinking about how AI has made shifts to our curriculum in college, right? Or how we teach. So I want to kind of talk about the benefits and the challenges that AI brings in all of these different ways. So we're thinking about, like, yes, one of the really cool things about AI, I think, is that it can help our students kind of personalize their own learning experiences. But then there are challenges that kind of come along with that as well that we should be considering as we start to integrate maybe AI into our classes. Then thinking about like AI and critical thinking and what that means. Like, yes, AI can be super helpful for our students in regard to how they critically think, but it might also cause some extra challenges that we haven't had before with critical thinking. Thinking about how we might use AI for our own professional practice and some kind of like effective practices that we should consider, and then recognizing the importance of AI literacy. So those are going to be sort of like the big things that we're hoping to hit today. All right, so let's talk kind of about the benefits. So thinking about how we can use AI to help our students personalize their own learning experiences. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but to kind of recap, if you haven't had a chance to pop into some of the other sessions, one of a really effective way to use AI tools is as a semi-Socratic tutor, which is basically to have an AI tool ask questions, but also offer guidance when students get stuck. So like a true like Socratic tutor will just ask question after question after question after question. But thinking about a tutor that can sort of answer your questions, but then also help steer you in the right direction if you are not understanding or if you're getting questions consistently wrong or something like that is really, really helpful. This is something I've played around with quite a bit, and it does a really good job, I think, John.
And in the very next session, we'll be talking about how to do that using OER materials for your classes that will primarily respond only with material it's been trained on, so it will be accurate and it will align with your course content using the same terminology, et cetera.
So it's worth mentioning that like our students can choose to use AI to help themselves outside of the classroom if they understand how to do that. But John's point is that we can also help them, help guide them throughout that process. And the whole next session is going to be a really interesting one about how you as an instructor can help do that. So shameless plug. You can also, so with the tutoring, you can also use AI to help like explain concepts, which is super helpful. There's also a really cool tool called Notebook LM, which we will talk more about tomorrow in a session in the morning, which is another just really cool AI that can sort of like change how we absorb information or change how we learn. I don't want to say too much more about it. You can click on the example later if you're really interested. But John has like a whole beautiful thing for tomorrow, so I don't want to steal his thunder.
Basically, though, students upload content to it and it will generate a podcast with a male and female voice discussing the content. And it's a really great way of getting nice summaries of materials.
Yep. So off thinking about like offering like another alternative to just reading, right? So there's something like that. You can use AI to generate quizzes on material. A cool thing about that also is you can tailor like the difficulty level of the quizzes. You can say how much or how little information you want to cover on a particular topic, which is really cool. So you could ask AI to generate like a quiz with just 10 questions. You could say that you want them all to be multiple choice, or you could ask AI to generate a 50-question midterm, right? With a variety of different sorts of questions and scenarios, which is a really nice way for our students to get practice outside of class.
And you can use Bloom's taxonomy to talk about the level of the question. So it will take that into account in terms of what types of questions it provides to students.
Yep. You can also use AI to receive feedback on your written work if you choose. I think it's important for our students to understand that everything that they put into an AI tool is now in that AI tool. So all of the stuff that you input gets saved in that training database, right? So it's really important that like if you're telling your students to upload their own work into an AI tool to get feedback, your students need to understand that they should remove any like sensitive or like identifying information from that document before they put it in, because you don't want OpenAI to like know your social security number, for example, right? That should never be in a paper, but you never know.
It's on the dark web, but it should be out in the AI tool.
So students can use, and this is something I was talking about yesterday, students in one of my classes over the summer were actually they were putting in drafts of their paper and asking the AI tool to grade it like an upbeat, but what the heck did they say? I don't know. They like described me in like 2 or 3 words, like supportive, but critical, I think. And they were asking the AI tool to give them specific feedback, like it was me, to see what grade I would give them on the drafts of their papers. Students can use AI tools to make mind maps, which we've been doing for a long time, like on paper or on boards, but I mean, digitally too, right? But there's a cool AI tool that I linked there. Or they can use AI to help with research. So we just did a whole session on research, like a little while, like just before this one. But if you weren't able to make that one, then I did link an example of, I think Research Rabbit is linked here, which is my favorite. So if you want to see how AI tools can help with research, then you can click on that example and it will take you to it.
And you can also go to the video of that and grab the previous session and grab the links to the slides if you don't want to listen to the whole video.
It's true. We're very efficient. Oh, right. Okay. So now we're thinking about, so those are like the benefits, and there's more, right? Like those are just some of the big ones that, I listed that filled up the screen. So, but if we're thinking about, benefits, but then there are also some challenges with students using AI to personalize their own learning. I do believe that if students don't have at least some knowledge about a subject, AI could be problematic, right? So if you know nothing, maybe going to AI is not like the best thing first, right? Like maybe you should look at information that you've gotten from your instructor, or for sure reliable resource, because as we know, there is bias still present within different AI outputs.
Although we should note that has gotten better, that they have trained them to reduce that. Gemini in particular went a little overboard and tried to remove bias, even if the bias was historically accurate. But they corrected for that. So depending on the period that's being referenced, it will do better than it used to. But in general, image generation in particular tends to be very biased, and that has improved some, but it's not perfect.
Yep. I think Gemini was also the one that admitted to falling in love with its users. Wasn't that the one early on?
It was, I think so.
Yeah, which I found interesting and a little scary. So if you don't know anything, perhaps going to ChatGPT or Claude or wherever is not the best starting point, right? So it's important to encourage our students to understand that.
Although early on, ChatGPT did encourage someone to leave their spouse because they were in love with them. But that was early on.
Early on. At this point, we've talked quite a bit in the past about AI hallucinations. This happens when an AI tool doesn't know the answer to a question or know something. And I put "know" in air quotes because it's predictive text. So it basically looks for words and puts them together. So an AI hallucination is when an AI tool doesn't know the answer to your question, so instead it makes something up. So I've linked a pretty well-known example here. This one I think is the lawyer. Yes. So this poor guy used ChatGPT or cited fake court cases that ChatGPT hallucinated and then was found out. And that was very problematic, and there are ads everywhere because Forbes. Okay. There are also, whoops.
I'll leave it. So
There are also sometimes, like contextual limitations, like the AI tool. So like a lot of like OpenAI, for example, is still pretty like secretive about like where the training data comes from. Like we know it comes from us, very much so, right? Not totally, like they're starting to kind of open up a little bit, but like the training data that kind of goes into these tools is not, it doesn't cover everything, right? Like all of the information in the whole world has not been fed into OpenAI yet. So there might be some like contextual limitations or discipline specific limitations or misinformation. Like if we go back to the bias thing, that might be present in some of these outputs just because we're not at the point for AI to know everything at this moment.
although it does have more information than any one person has access,
It has
or
a
than
lot.
any one library is likely to have access to.
It has a whole, yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a whole bunch, right? But sometimes it's important to like the nuance, right? Like might not really be there all the way yet. You also really want to think about accessibility. So, and in a few different ways, right? But mostly if you have two students and one of them is using the free version of ChatGPT and the other is using the paid version, the person who is using the paid version is going to get a better output, right? So you're thinking about somebody who's paying $20 a month to get better quality of responses versus someone who is not. Or someone who doesn't have, maybe they're at home and they don't have reliable internet access, so they can't use it at all. Those sorts of things are important to consider if you are going to bring AI into your classroom.
And the best strategy is to only take into account what the free tools can do and share that with students, that everything they need to do can be done with the free tools. And note that the paid ones will give you more options, but that's not necessary for the purpose of our classes.
Right, absolutely. So transparency in that way, like John mentioned, is excellent. Or important. Okay, so thinking about AI and critical thinking, right? And how it can help our students think their way through different assignments. So you can encourage your students to interact with AI tools to help them brainstorm for assignments, to think about various problem solving scenarios. So like a lot of the times we think about, or like when we're trying to come up with ideas or things to explore, we think of like one or two and then we choose between them, right? The cool thing about AI is that it will keep giving you more and more and more and more ideas, right? Like you just have to ask it to continue doing so. So like a quick example that has nothing whatsoever to do with critical thinking. I am participating in our YMCA's annual fundraiser that's happening next month. And every year we put together like some gift baskets that people can like buy raffle tickets for. And like last year I did a couple gift baskets and I'm like, I want something different this year. So I asked AI to give me like a list of 10 potential gift baskets that I could put together, and it did. And I hated all of them. So then I asked it for 10 more. Then I started guiding it a little bit. And I said, listen, I don't want to spend $200 on a gift basket full of Legos. Can we make it like under $50, please? And it kept giving me different outputs as I continued to refine what I was looking for. And I mean, I ended up like by the end of the exchange that I had with ChatGPT yesterday, I probably had gotten 250 or more ideas for various gift baskets. And it would have kept going, right? And just kind of continuing to make more suggestions for me. So the cool thing, right, is that you can ask it to help you brainstorm or come up with ideas, and it won't get tired of doing so. You can also have your students evaluate the output of AI tools or think about the interactions that they have with AI. So this is an assignment that I've done previously, especially, well, I've done both of them actually. So one assignment I've graded the exchange that my students have had with the AI tool. So like the questions that they ask, and this was after sort of like we talked about prompt engineering a little bit. So I wanted to see what sort of questions they asked, if they challenged ChatGPT at all, if they add like how they asked for the output to be formatted. So whether they asked for a list or a paragraph or a chart or whatever. So that's like kind of an interesting activity that you can have them do, sort of interact with the tool and then grade them based on how well or poorly they do that. Again, and evaluate the output of AI tools as well. And also to explain their process as they complete their assignments. So if they are using AI, then have them reflect on what that is like, and have them talk about that. And that can be really helpful. John, do you have things to add?
That all sounds good. And, one point, though, is that AI can be used to short circuit critical thinking. And there is a lot of concern that students are using it rather than engaging in critical thinking. But with well-designed assignments, you can use it to have students develop their critical thinking skills. So it is going to require a bit of a shift in the types of assignments that we give to take into account the fact that students will be using AI tools.
And it's a wonderful point, right? We did a session yesterday that was talking about authentic assessment and how you're designing your assignments. Second shameless plug of the day, I guess. But it's huge, right? Like as I started to integrate ChatGPT into my courses, I had to really think and redesign a lot of the things that I was doing to make the exercises with the AI tools be relevant. So it's a huge point. Okay. Of course, right, if you're thinking about AI and how it can be used to encourage critical thinking, you also want to keep in mind that, it's a cool tool. It's also fast. It also really streamlines the thinking and the whole process. So your students might be like, this is great. Like, why think? I could just ask ChatGPT to like do it for me, right? So they could completely rely on AI to generate ideas, to make their assignments, things like that. So that is a possibility, right? They also might not, especially if they are just learning the subject matter, they might not have the knowledge to properly evaluate the output of the AI tool. So they might not know if the content that was generated is appropriate, if it's accurate. Like those are very real concerns. And then they might not also understand that their different classes have different AI policies, right? So although we're getting a lot better and we're talking a lot about putting an AI policy on your syllabus and being explicit with your students about what that is, they might, let's say you're a first-year freshman student, right? And 4 of your 5 classes have a pretty lenient AI policy and 1 does not. I mean, you could forget that the 1 does not, or you might assume those aren't good things, but it could happen, right? So definitely bringing AI in does cause some potential challenges. And there are probably more that I have forgotten about.
And related to that, if you do have an AI policy, it's really good, or some type of restriction on AI use, it probably should be embedded in the assignments themselves, because students will not generally go back and look at the syllabus. And it's difficult to keep track of what each of the 5 courses or so that students are taking, what the specific restrictions or requirements are. So be explicit about that and be transparent about that on the assignments as well as in the syllabus.
Yep. So I like to put a note actually for a while I was putting it at the bottom with all of the other kind of like criteria, but I'm thinking about moving it to the top, like maybe, you know, and just so that it's there so that they can reference it. It's also helpful for our students to know where to look to get more information on this. I was talking yesterday about how many of our students are really worried that they will be penalized for violating academic integrity when they didn't mean to, right? When it was not intentional. So I think, you know, encouraging them to know where to look. If they're going to use different, you know, like if they're going to use ChatGPT, understand like how they would cite it and, you know, where those resources are can be very helpful for them. Can help alleviate like some of the worry and stress that they feel, I think, when it comes to using these tools. Okay, so using AI for us, how can we use AI to sort of like help us do stuff? So you can use AI to help you develop content for your courses. I have done this. I think John has done this quite a bit also. I love using AI to help me develop content, mostly because developing content takes a really long time. Coming up with examples takes a really long time, and I try to be creative and to provide various examples of things. You know, but I also like to try to switch things up from one semester to the next. I don't want to be kind of like always doing the same thing all the time. So using AI to help me do that has been really helpful. I'll show you, John, would you mind clicking on the worksheets?
Sure. Make me work.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. So this is something that I used ChatGPT to help me make. So my students have a really hard time with like citations and yes, there are generators, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want them to understand like that even though you use a citation generator to make a citation for you, you still need to be able to determine if the citation is right or not. You know, so I tell them like, listen, if you want to use citation generators, like have at it, like that's fine with me. But I'm going to be looking at the citations that get generated. And if they're wrong, then I'm going to take off points. So I wanted to do an exercise with them where they could identify different pieces of information based on what they see, right? So you'll see like the first one here, and I asked, like when I prompted ChatGPT, I said, I want a print book with one author. I want, you know, like a journal article from a database. And I told it like a bunch of different things that I wanted. So with the first one, I have a whole list of criteria. But like obviously some of this is not applicable, right? So like the author we have, the title we have, the publishing company we have, but there's no volume, there's no number, there are no page numbers, and there's no link because it's a print book. And then I ask them, what kind of source is this? So I want them to understand that these are the different pieces that we look for in an MLA citation and to practice identifying those. And it gave me like a whole bunch. It made up all these citations. They're all fake. But it was handy. Thank you, John. So like I could have done this, right? And it wouldn't have taken like a super long time, but I think it worked out okay. So you can also use AI to like, some people are really, really good at making rubrics. I am not one of those people. I always have a really hard time. So I use AI to help me make rubrics. And there's an example there that you can click on. We won't do it right now just for the interest of time. You can also ask AI to summarize or transcribe your notes. So that's a nice option. Claude can, the free version of Claude, if you handwrite your notes, you can take a picture of it, upload it to Claude, and then Claude will transcribe your notes for you and turn it into text. Does the paid version of ChatGPT do that?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I'm not positive.
Okay. You can also use AI to help you brainstorm, you know, different ideas for your workshops or research or et cetera, which I like to do as well.
And by the way, going back to the transcription of notes,
Yeah.
we turned on a few new features in AI, the AI companion in Zoom, so that we gave it access to the screen sharing so that now it can do an OCR on any text that people are sharing on slides. I don't think it will take handwriting, but it will take the images that people present and add that as part of the summary. So the summaries you should be getting are going to be a little bit better. I also turned on this morning, so you should be getting this if you signed up for the session. The AI meeting summary will be mailed to you after the meeting is ended, once it finishes that. So you will get a summary of everything that was discussed here. Now, it identifies speakers by whoever is logged in. So I think this will show up as CELT is speaking for either of us, but you can at least see what was discussed. And the quality of the notes are getting better and better.
Yes. Yeah, I remember like one of the Zoom summaries, it like misunderstood SUNY Oswego as Sunny Oswego is how it spelled it,
Which clearly didn't check with any climate records or whatever.
But yeah, it is like, and but that mistake was probably like 6 months ago or so. So, it is fascinating how quickly it's advancing. All right, so if we're also thinking about ways that we might use AI in the work that we do, we're thinking about assessment. Lots of people are talking about this, talking about, like, yes, these tools are super cool, but, we still want our students to be able to critically think. We want our students to adhere to our academic integrity policies. We don't want our students to just generate a paper in 2 minutes and then submit it for a grade, right? So we talk about AI detection tools. There's more it's coming up more. Ultimately, I would still encourage everybody to avoid the temptation to use AI detection tools. I've read some studies where it's maybe getting better sometimes, but like not really. It's really, I don't know.
In general, it's really easy to avoid. And one of the things we'll talk about in tomorrow's session on creating GPTs is that there are some GPTs which are devoted entirely to making the material generated from ChatGPT or other AI tools to be undetectable by any of the existing detection algorithms.
It's mostly, none of the detection tools are consistently correct enough, right? For them to be reliable. And there was just a study that was published, I think, at the end of 2024 that I read recently, that I don't think is in this presentation, but I could share, but it was looking at detection software and basically determined that that was still sort of the case, that it's not consistently correct enough. There are too many factors to consider, especially if you think about, like a student might use ChatGPT to generate an essay, but then they might take that essay and go to Claude and tell Claude, rewrite this or summarize this or whatever, right? So depending on how something was made, that also makes it really challenging.
It's especially true, though, as an issue for students who are not native English speakers, that the false positive rate there is dramatically higher because they've been trained in English using a somewhat formulaic structure, which is a sort of way in which AI works.
Yep. We did talk a little bit yesterday about some things that you can look for if you suspect that your student has used AI to generate a paper. That presentation was called How to Talk to Students About AI. And there are some suggestions there of what you can do if you do suspect that your students have used AI to generate a paper, beyond just relying on a detection tool. Sometimes also it's worth mentioning, which John and I spoke about yesterday, thinking about what sort of assignments you have and what the assignments are asking your students to do can also be another nice way to make it more challenging for them to effectively use AI to complete the entire thing. So like scaffolded assignments, for example, are one nice way to help deter that. Thinking about using AI to grade student work. So like we mentioned earlier, it's important to remember that if you're using the free version of or really the free or paid version of ChatGPT. The only ones that are excluded, right, that truly protect your data are the versions that are like the business plan you know what I mean, that somebody might buy. So whether you're using the free or paid version of ChatGPT, your data is not private, right? OpenAI is still using that data. So I personally do not believe in inputting student work into AI tools. I believe that it's my students' intellectual property. And I do not want to input any of their stuff unless I got their permission to do so. Even if I took, like you could remove their names or identifying information, but I believe it's their intellectual property. And I am not at the point where I want to do that yet. So that kind of talks about some of the ethical, privacy, data protection concerns. One thing that you can do, though, if you do leave a lot of feedback is I often will take notes, right? And sometimes actually not sometimes, all the time, they're pretty messy. They're bulleted. I like to handwrite them as I'm going through grading. So what you can do is you could take your notes and ask your AI tool to make them prettier, or make them, can you write these so that they sound, or maybe you're grading and you're really tired. Does this still sound encouraging, or am I getting bitter? And you can ask it to kind of read over your feedback before you return it to your students. That is one option.
And I have not used ChatGPT or AI tools to grade or give feedback to students on their work. However, there have been some studies which has found that AI tools are much more consistent in applying a rubric consistently across all student papers than faculty are. That faculty tend to be much more careful with the first few things they grade, and then it tends to go downhill the more that they grade. And so there's a lot of variation. And similarly, if we have different instructors grading the same material with the same rubric, there's much more variation in the grades that's assigned across instructors, as well as for a given instructor across time, than there is in AI evaluations and the feedback provided. So AI is a bit more consistent. I just would feel wrong using the tool rather than giving my own feedback. But it is important to note that many people are using it. In fact, it's one of the most common uses by faculty. And it's really taken off in the last few months.
Yes. Yep. So you could think about different ways, if you want to use AI to help, right? Or, again, use AI to develop a rubric that you might include with your feedback or something like that, right? But at this time, I think John and I agree that we are both we're not in that place to use AI to give feedback. So you also, as you are working on developing or refining your assignments, all of those sorts of things, especially now, right? Because, we were talking yesterday a little bit about how maybe a year ago, many of us were kind of feeling like AI was sort of like the elephant in the room. Like if you didn't say anything about it, then maybe our students didn't know about it and maybe they wouldn't use it.
Surveys suggest that that's been wrong for at least a year.
But now, right, we can pretty confidently say that that's not really the case, right? Our students know what AI is. Many of them have used it at least once. So it's not really a secret anymore. So we want to be thinking about understanding, if you're a student, why are you motivated to potentially go to AI, or why might you be motivated to cheat through an assignment instead of doing the work? And there are a bunch of different potential reasons for that. One of the big ones that I personally see a lot, because I work with a lot of freshman students, is, they're still understanding how to college. They're learning how to manage their time. They're realizing that the work that they have here is a lot different. It's a lot more demanding than the work that they had previously. I'll give an example, right? I had a student who used AI the wrong way, and it was really clear that he had done that. And when I had a conversation with him, he said, Yeah, Stephanie, like it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't prioritized my time and I wanted to make sure that I could submit something to you so that I wouldn't get a 0. And then like, ironically, well, we talked about that, right? But time management it's a huge reason why some of our students might cheat. And there are lots of other reasons as well, right? But like John and I spoke yesterday about thinking about the assignments that we design, and thinking about authentic assessment, right? How students are more motivated to do the work when they feel like there's something in it for them, right? When they can get something out of it, make some connection, either to classes they're going to take in the future or to their careers in the future, right? So finding ways to motivate our students. So because our students have access to this technology and might be more inclined to take the easy way out, it puts more on us to be thinking about our assignments and how we might redesign them. Do you have anything that you want to add at this point?
No, well, except by keeping the assignment scaffolded, it becomes a much smaller chunk that they have to do at each stage, which reduces the issue about time management. So they don't have a major assignment coming due. And, you can also include in your description how much time they should expect to spend on that. And there are tools out there online. Betsy Berry created a couple of those that you can use to estimate the time. And by putting that in, it gives students some idea of how much time they should reserve for tasks. And also, perhaps this was something discussed in another workshop, you could use some automated reminders in Brightspace a day or two before assignments are due to remind them that this deadline is coming up and that they should make sure they allocate time for that, so that they don't run into the same where they see a deadline popping up in the calendar that's due at midnight and it's now 11:30, and it reduces the likelihood that they'll rely on an AI tool as a shortcut.
There was also a really interesting suggestion from Bowen and Watson. Those were the authors of our reading group book from last semester, Teaching with AI, which I would highly recommend. I really liked it. But they suggested that, okay, if we are going to see more AI generated work, right? How do we grade it? How do we assess it? And one of their suggestions was, okay, like you go to ChatGPT and you put in a prompt and then it spits you out a 500-word essay, and you don't do anything else. That essay, right, that the AI wrote is like an automatic C. Like that's where that starts. So what does it mean for AI generated work, right? And how can we help our students see that they can improve the quality of that work and that they have something really important to add to it? Teaching them how to collaborate more with these tools instead of rely solely on the tools.
And part of the rationale for that is that we should assume that many students or most students will be using AI tools, and that proportion is going to be going up. And they're going to be using them later in their lives. And if they can't do better in terms of their contribution than an AI tool, they are not developing the skills they need to be successful in the future. That since they will have access to AI tools, so would high school graduates and high school dropouts. And if all they can do is type in a prompt or copy and paste a prompt in from an assignment, anyone could do that. And so what we really need to do is get students to be able to use AI effectively to contribute beyond just the value of AI tools. One of the concerns that came up in the discussion, though, is with the rapid rate of improvement in AI tools, it may be harder and harder to distinguish AI work from the work of students. And I think that's already starting to happen to some extent. And that is going to have a pretty major disruption in many labor markets, and it already is in many. And so the world is changing, and this is going to be a major feature in terms of what types of jobs students will be getting and what their contribution should be in addition to AI. And that's probably worth having a discussion with students about.
It's a scary thing for them also, right? I mean, we've had conversations about, well, what does it mean that, like now many of these entry-level jobs that many of our graduates would be looking for, right after they graduate, many of those are disappearing because AI is now able to do some of those things. So what does it mean, right? To have this, yes, the old skills are still very important, right? But like, what does it mean to be able to do that plus make yourself better than a bot, right? Like better, that you can do more, that you can use the tools, but you also have all of these other things that you can bring to the table.
Because if we don't prepare students for this world, we're essentially preparing a potential generation of students getting ready to be TV repair people or telephone operators. So we need to prepare them to be adaptable and to be able to use these tools well.
Just checking. Okay, good. Okay, so in that spirit, sort of talking about the importance of AI literacy in our classrooms and why it's important for our students to understand what AI is, what it can do, and at least have, I will argue, a basic working knowledge of AI, right? So like in my classroom, I see probably like 80% of my students are either like, oh, this is cool, or meh, whatever, you know, and probably 20% are like, this is terrible, I don't want anything to do with it, you know, whatever. That's been my own experience in my classrooms so far. I know it's very different depending on what you teach and all of those things. But I try to tell my students that, like, if you love AI or if you hate it, you should still be at least somewhat AI literate in that you understand how AI tools work. You understand, you know, some of the things like the big picture considerations to keep in mind, like the ethical concerns and bias and stuff like that. It's important to have like a general sort of working knowledge. So in my classes, in addition to doing some stuff with the tools, right? We also kind of do like an overview of generative AI and talk about, you know, sort of like where things started and where things are now, what some of the different tools are and what they can do, just so that they have some sorts of idea, right, of like what's happening. So I linked a couple of handy resources here for you. The first one is the Fact 2 Guide to Optimizing AI in Higher Education. This is the second edition.
I like the first edition better, which was one that actually Stephanie was one of the primary authors of. But this builds on that and includes a lot of other junk.
There's a lot.
There's a lot more.
A lot in this one. But you can find the first edition online also, which is way shorter.
And it's more focused on education and how we might use it in teaching.
We also anticipate that there is likely going to be a third guide. John and I are both going to be serving on the task group that's doing different things. I saw it in there.
Oh, okay. So that's new. That wasn't there when I was
Wasn't there initially.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe. So stay tuned. The second one is the book that I referenced a little while ago. This is Teaching with AI. This is really cool because there's a lot of examples in this book. So like, if you're not sure where to get started, this whole book has just like these huge lists of potential prompts, different assignments that you might consider. It's a great book. So I would highly recommend the middle one.
And the nice thing about it, and one of the reasons we chose it for the reading group, is that it's written in a very thoughtful manner in a way that's not going to become obsolete very quickly because AI is changing a lot. The basic principles they talk about will apply pretty much no matter what happens with AI.
Yeah. And the last one that I included is from our colleague Ulysses Mejias from Com Studies. This is a book that he published in 2024. And it talks about, and there's this version, or this is like not the whole thing. His book is called Data Grab, and it's basically like talking about concerns with data privacy and like why we should be considering those sorts of things. And because AI and data privacy are so closely linked, although his book isn't all about AI and data privacy, it's more about data privacy, like the whole thing. The two things kind of go hand in hand. So if you want to learn more about data, I would recommend his book.
Another book that I would recommend is Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, which is a really good overview of how we might consider working with AI and using AI tools effectively. And Ethan Mollick has been very active from the very beginning with AI in terms of coming up with some really interesting prompts and good applications. And it's a very balanced approach to AI.
Awesome. So here are a few, right? Some talking specifically about AI in higher education and some talking, more about the other side, right? Thinking about data privacy and things like that, and John's recommendation too. I think that's it.
And we are doing a reading group starting in a couple of weeks, actually, on another book on AI, which is by Dan Levy and Alejandro. I forgot her last name.
Definitely.
But in any case,
Yeah.
we'll be starting that soon, and some of you have already signed up for that.
That one looks like it's going to be a good one too. I'm really excited to unpack that one.
That one's a bit more of a hands-on one. It's not quite at the same level. It's more like, here's how you can use it for
Yeah.
these specific purposes. So
Yep. That one also, I think really the book that we're doing in spring talks kind of about it's a bit of a bigger picture. Like the first one was more like how educators can use the tools specifically. And then this one, the first half is for teachers and the second half is for students. So I liked that piece about it quite a bit.
And they also have a nice chapter on creating GPTs, and also they have web resources that show prompts that you can use, and they're constantly updating that. So that's going to be, I think it's going to be really effective. And one thing we're going to do differently in this reading group is ask the people who are participating to apply something from the previous chapters they read and bring it to the next meeting and share their responses with it. That came at the request of some of the participants in the Teaching with AI book that we used last time.
So there's homework.
But we're looking forward to it. And also, by the way, we're doing another reading group, which is a really great one. And that kind of came up in the discussion this morning, in the longer session we had. David Yeager has done some really phenomenal work investigating student motivation. Very little discussion of AI, but it's also a great reading group.
I'm excited for that.
Any questions or comments or thoughts? Okay, if you have any questions, let us know and we'll stop the recording.